The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, New York, shimmered like a crystal palace. Chandeliers hung high, casting a radiant glow that reflected off cascades of white roses arranged in elegant arches, each petal bathed in candlelight. The scent of expensive perfume mingled with the faint clink of champagne flutes, creating an atmosphere of irresistible opulence. 300 guests, New York's elite, interspersed with a few sharp-eyed reporters, filled the rows of velvet chairs, their gazes a mix of curiosity and judgment. This was the wedding of the season, an event expected to cement the legacy of the Whitmore family, one of the city's most powerful dynasties. But for Ella Monroe, the 28-year-old bride standing at the edge of the aisle, it was the pinnacle of a dream she'd scarcely dared to believe. Ella's fingers brushed the delicate lace of her wedding gown, an elegant but simple design, far removed from the ostentatious options Ryan had suggested. Her dark hair was swept into a loose chignon, a single pearl pin glinting under the lights. Her hazel eyes sparkled with a blend of joy and nervousness as she took her first step down the aisle, the string quartet swelling into a tender rendition of Pachelbel's canon. She was no heiress, no socialite, just a freelance artist from Brooklyn, raised in a cramped apartment above her father's deli. Her intelligence and resilience had carried her through art school, through late nights sketching in dim studios, through a life that taught her to guard her heart. Yet here she was, about to marry Ryan Whitmore, the charming, golden-haired scion whose smile could melt any defense. It felt like a fairy tale, fragile but real. The guests turned, their smiles polite, their whispers hushed. Ella caught sight of Lila Carter, her best friend, in the front row. Lila, a freelance journalist with a blunt streak, winked and gave a thumbs up, her bright red lipstick framing a mischievous grin. Ella's nerves eased slightly. Lila had been her rock through the whirlwind engagement, the one who'd warned her about Ryan's playboy reputation, but cheered when Ella insisted she'd seen his softer side. Further back, Margaret Whitmore sat ramrod straight, her silver hair immaculate, her expression unreadable. As Ryan's mother, she'd orchestrated much of the wedding's grandeur, though her approval of Ella always felt like a thin veneer over skepticism. Ella's gaze shifted to the altar, where Ryan should have been waiting, but only the officiant stood there, hands clasped, brow faintly creased. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ella's steps faltered, her satin slippers catching on the red runner. Where was he? Her heart thudded, a familiar fear creeping in. The shadow of her mother's abandonment, the day she'd woken at 7 to an empty kitchen and a note that read, "I can't stay." She shook it off. Ryan wouldn't do that. He'd promised a future. Through late-night texts, lavish gifts, the way he'd spun her around in Central Park. They meant something, didn't they? Lila was on her feet now, weaving through the aisle with the urgency of a storm. Her face was pale, her usual confidence replaced by something Ella couldn't name. She pressed a crumpled piece of paper into Ella's hand, her voice low and urgent. "Ella, I'm so sorry." Ella's fingers trembled as she unfolded the note. Ryan's scrawled handwriting stared back. "I'm sorry, I can't do this." The words pierced her chest, a sharp pain stealing her breath. The music faltered, then stopped. Whispers turned to gasps. Flashes erupted, their harsh light pinning Ella like a specimen under glass. She heard a woman's voice, Margaret's perhaps, mutter, "What is that boy thinking?" A reporter in the back row scribbled furiously, his pen a metronome of her humiliation. Ella's knees buckled, the note slipping from her fingers to the floor. She pressed a hand to her chest, willing herself to breathe, to stand tall. She would not cry, not here, not in front of these strangers who saw her as an outsider, a nobody who dared to climb too high. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, "You're stronger than you know, kid." But the weight of 300 stares was crushing, each one a reminder of the life she thought she could claim. She swayed, her vision blurring, and then a hand caught hers, firm, warm, pulling her from the abyss. She looked up, startled, into the piercing gray eyes of Nathan Whitmore. Ryan's older brother, the enigmatic CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, was a man she'd met only twice, once at a tense family dinner where his silence had chilled the room, and again when he'd nodded curtly at her engagement party. At 34, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair swept back. His tailored black suit exuded an authority that made people step aside. Nathan was Ryan's opposite. Where Ryan was light and charm, Nathan was steel and shadow, a man who collected rare books and ruled boardrooms with an iron hand. He'd been standing at the edge of the ballroom, nearly invisible amid the chaos, but now he was here, his grip anchoring her as the room spun. The crowd hushed, their shock palpable. Nathan's voice, low and commanding, cut through the silence. "There will be a wedding today," he said, his gaze sweeping the guests, daring anyone to object. He turned to Ella, his expression unreadable, but his eyes softening for a fleeting moment. "If Ryan isn't man enough to stand here, I will." Ella's breath hitched. The words made no sense. Nathan, the man who barely spoke to her, who seemed carved from ice, was offering to marry her. She glanced at Lila, whose wide eyes mirrored her own confusion. Margaret rose, her lips parting in protest, but Nathan's raised hand silenced her. The reporters leaned forward, pens poised, sensing a story that would dominate headlines. Ella's mind raced. She wanted to run, to vanish into the Brooklyn streets where no one knew her pain. But Nathan's hand was steady, his presence a lifeline in the storm. She saw the pity in the guest's eyes, the judgmental purse of Margaret's lips. If she walked away now, she'd be the jilted bride forever, her name a footnote in gossip columns. Her throat tightened, but she forced her voice to steady. "Why?" she whispered, for Nathan's ears alone. He leaned closer, his voice a murmur against the chaos. "Because you don't deserve this. Let me help you." The officiant cleared his throat, glancing nervously between them. The crowd waited, breathless. Ella's heart pounded, her fear of abandonment warring with the spark of defiance Ryan's betrayal had ignited. She didn't know Nathan, didn't trust him, but in that moment, she trusted her own strength. She straightened, her chin lifting, and met his gaze. "Okay," she said, barely audible. Nathan's lips twitched, the ghost of a smile. He faced the officiant, his voice ringing out. "Proceed." The music resumed, hesitant but resolute, as Ella Monroe, the girl who'd just lost everything, took the arm of Nathan Whitmore, the man who'd just altered her fate. The flashes flared, the whispers grew, and somewhere in the distance, a door slammed shut on the life she'd known. The opulent ballroom of the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan froze in an endless moment. 300 pairs of eyes locked onto Ella Monroe and Nathan Whitmore, the air heavy with shock. Ella stood at the altar, her hands still clasped in Nathan's steady grip, feeling like a castaway adrift in a storm, tethered only by a fragile thread. Ryan's note, "I'm sorry, I can't do this," still echoed in her mind, each word a sharp cut into her pride. The relentless flashes from reporters' cameras blazed, their harsh light threatening to burn her, and the murmurs of the guests rose like a swelling wave, poised to drown her. Nathan's declaration hung in the air. "If Ryan can't be her husband, I will." His voice, low and commanding, reverberated through the ballroom, silencing the room. Ella's mind reeled, unable to grasp the meaning of his words. Nathan Whitmore, Ryan's cold older brother, CEO of Whitmore Enterprises, a man she'd met only a handful of times and exchanged fewer than 10 sentences with, was offering to marry her in front of hundreds of people under the judgmental gaze of New York's elite. This was madness, impossible to be real. The crowd erupted in stunned whispers. A few reporters scribbled frantically, while others raised cameras, capturing every second of the event that would dominate headlines. Margaret Whitmore, Ryan and Nathan's mother, shot to her feet in the front row, her lips pursed, her hands trembling as if to intervene. "Nathan, what are you doing?" she said, her voice low but sharp, audible to those nearby. But Nathan merely glanced at her, his eyes icy, and raised a hand to signal her to sit. Margaret hesitated, her face taut, but she sank back into her chair, her disapproval evident in her rigid posture. Ella felt as if her feet no longer touched the ground, her mind a chaos of conflicting emotions. The humiliation of Ryan's betrayal still burned in her chest, but now a new fear arose. Fear that she was stepping into a game whose rules she didn't understand. She looked at Nathan, searching for a sign, an explanation in his piercing gray eyes. He stood there, tall and unyielding, his black suit tailored to his commanding frame, but his face revealed nothing beyond absolute control. Why was he doing this? Pity? Family honor? Or some hidden agenda she couldn't yet see? She turned to Lila Carter, her best friend standing nearby, Lila's eyes wide with shock. Lila shook her head slightly, as if to say she didn't understand either, but then leaned in, whispering urgently, "Ella, you don't have to do this. You can walk out of here, head high. Don't let these vultures—" She jerked her head toward the reporters. "See you break." But then Lila paused, looking into Ella's eyes, and added, her voice softer, "But if you stay, don't let them win. Show them you're stronger than this." Lila's words pierced the fog in Ella's mind. She looked around, seeing the pitying stares, the judgmental smirks, and the truth hit her like a blow. If she ran now, she'd be the jilted bride forever, her name tied to failure and shame. But marry Nathan? The thought made her shudder. She barely knew him, a cold, distant man who seemed to live in a world apart from hers. Yet he was here, his hand gripping hers, and in that moment, he was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Ella took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she whispered, for Nathan's ears only, "Why are you doing this? I don't understand." Nathan leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear, his voice low but resolute, like a vow. "Trust me, Ella. You don't deserve this humiliation today. Let me help you." The sincerity in his voice stunned her, but doubt gnawed at her. Help her? Or help himself? The Whitmores were a family of calculated moves, and she learned from Ryan that beautiful promises could hide dark intentions. But Nathan's eyes, though cold, held no trace of deceit. She felt the strength in his hand, as if he were lending her a piece of the courage she'd lost. The officiant cleared his throat, his gaze flickering between Ella and Nathan, clearly flustered. "Shall we proceed?" he asked, his voice wavering, clutching the ceremonial book tightly. Ella felt every eye on her, the weight of the choice pressing down on her shoulders. She thought of her father, who'd taught her that self-respect was something no one could take away, and of her mother, who'd left her with a note, leaving her wary of rejection. She didn't want to be a victim anymore, didn't want Ryan or anyone to define her. Lila was right. She was stronger than this. She looked at Nathan, her chin lifting, and though her heart still raced, she spoke, her voice small but clear. "Okay." A collective gasp rippled through the room, as if the entire ballroom had been released from a spell. Nathan nodded, a flicker of surprise in his eyes before his controlled mask returned. He turned to the officiant, his voice ringing out, leaving no room for doubt. "Proceed." The string quartet resumed, the notes of the wedding march hesitant but resolute. Ella stood there, her hands still in Nathan's, feeling like a puppet guided by forces she couldn't name. The vows were recited in a haze. Words of love and commitment she repeated like someone in a dream. Nathan slid a gold ring onto her finger, his hand steady, unwavering. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and applause broke out, some genuine, some reluctant. Margaret clapped slowly, her smile sharp as a blade. As Nathan led her down the aisle, Ella's legs moved on autopilot, her wedding dress gliding over the red carpet. The cameras followed, their flashes an unrelenting assault. In a corner of the room, Lila rushed forward, pulling her into a tight hug. "You're insane, but I love your kind of insane," Lila said, her voice choked. "I'm staying with you tonight, okay? We need to talk." Ella nodded, her mind still reeling. Nathan stood a few steps away, speaking quietly with a man in a suit, perhaps his assistant. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable, then approached. "Let's go," he said. "The car's waiting outside." The drive to the Hamptons was silent, the city's lights fading into the darkness of Long Island. Nathan sat across from her in the sleek black SUV, the glow of his phone illuminating his sharp features. Ella clutched her wedding bouquet, the white roses beginning to wilt, a symbol of her shattered dream. The Whitmore estate loomed ahead, a modernist masterpiece of glass and steel, its sharp angles stark against the moonlit dunes. Inside, the house was as cold as its exterior, with polished marble floors and minimalist furnishings, devoid of warmth. Nathan led her to a spacious guest suite, its walls adorned with abstract art, a far cry from her cluttered Brooklyn apartment. "This is yours," he said, pausing at the door. "I meant what I said. I won't force anything on you. We can live as roommates if that's what you want. No expectations, no obligations." Ella looked at him, the weight of the day crashing over her. "Why did you do this, Nathan?" she asked, her voice hoarse, her fear of being a pawn spilling out. "Is this about your family, your reputation, or do you just pity me?" He stiffened, his jaw tightening. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "I don't pity you, Ella. I saw someone who deserved better than my brother's cowardice. And yes, my family's reputation matters. But this," he gestured between them, the ring glinting on her finger, "was my choice." She searched his eyes, looking for deceit but finding none. Only sincerity, albeit cold. "And what do you get out of this?" she asked, her voice small but resolute. He hesitated, his eyes flickering with something she couldn't name. "Time will tell," he said finally. "Rest. We'll talk tomorrow." He left, the door closing softly behind him. Ella se desplomó sobre la cama. Su vestido de boda se acumulaba a su alrededor como una nube caída. Her phone buzzed. Lila, texting a string of curses about Ryan and a promise to come soon. Ella touched the gold ring, cold and unfamiliar. Gratitude warred with suspicion, her heart torn between the man who'd saved her from disgrace and the questions about his true intentions. As the ocean whispered beyond the windows, Ella lay down, a bride in a stranger's house, her new life beginning, uncertain, but carrying a faint spark of hope that she could find herself again. The Whitmore estate in the Hamptons stood like a monument to wealth, its glass and steel facade gleaming under the pale morning light. Ella Monroe stepped out of the black SUV, her single suitcase clutched in her hand, the weight of her new reality pressing against her chest. The wedding at the Plaza Hotel was 3 days ago, a whirlwind of shock and defiance that had left her married to Nathan Whitmore, a man she barely knew, a stranger who'd stepped into the void left by his brother Ryan's betrayal. The gold band on her finger felt foreign, a cold reminder of the impulsive vow she'd made to salvage her dignity. Now, standing before this sprawling mansion, Ella felt like an interloper in a world that wasn't hers. Nathan stood beside her, his tailored suit impeccable, his expression as unreadable as ever. The drive from Manhattan had been silent, the hum of the engine filling the space where words might have lived. He hadn't spoken since they'd left the city, his attention fixed on his phone, leaving Ella to wrestle with her tangled emotions, gratitude for his intervention, suspicion of his motives, and the raw ache of Ryan's abandonment. She glanced at him now, his sharp cheekbones and gray eyes catching the light, and wondered what kind of life she'd stumbled into. "Welcome home," Nathan said, his voice low, almost formal, as he gestured toward the entrance. The word home jarred Ella. Her home was a cramped Brooklyn apartment, its walls papered with sketches, its air thick with the scent of coffee and paint. This place, with its towering windows and manicured lawns, was a universe apart. Inside, the estate was as cold as its exterior. Polished marble floors stretched endlessly, reflecting the light from minimalist chandeliers. The furniture was sleek, all sharp lines and neutral tones, devoid of warmth or personality. Ella's sneakers squeaked against the floor, a small rebellion against the sterile perfection. Nathan led her through a maze of hallways, past a grand staircase and a gallery of abstract art, to a spacious guest suite. The room was larger than her entire apartment, with a king-size bed draped in white linens, a sleek desk, and a balcony overlooking the ocean. It was beautiful, but it felt like a hotel, not a home. "This is yours," Nathan said, pausing at the door. He met her gaze, his eyes steady but distant. "I meant what I said at the wedding. I won't force anything on you. We can live as roommates if that's what you want. No expectations." Ella studied him, searching for a crack in his composed facade. His offer was generous, almost too generous, and it fueled the doubts Lila had planted about his intentions. Was this kindness, or a calculated move to keep her compliant? Thank you, she said, her voice cautious. I just need time. Nathan nodded, a flicker of something, understanding perhaps, crossing his face. Take all the time you need. I'll be in my office if you need me. He turned to leave, then paused, glancing back. The kitchen's stocked. Help yourself to anything. He was gone before she could respond, his footsteps fading down the hall. Ella set her suitcase on the bed. The zippers rasped loud in the silence. She unpacked slowly, her few belongings, a handful of clothes, a sketchbook, a worn copy of the bell jar, looking pitifully small in the cavernous room. She hung her favorite sweater in the closet, its frayed sleeves a stark contrast to the pristine surroundings, and felt a pang of homesickness. This wasn't her world. She was Ella Monroe, a 28-year-old artist raised by a single father in Brooklyn, not the wife of a billionaire CEO. Yet here she was, bound to Nathan Whitmore by a ring and a moment of desperation. The first week passed in a haze of adjustment. Ella avoided the main areas of the house, sticking to her room or the balcony, where she sketched the ocean's restless waves. The estate was a labyrinth of luxury: indoor pool, private cinema, a gym with equipment she didn't know how to use. But it felt like a cage, its opulence mocking her simplicity. She refused to touch the credit card Nathan had left on the desk, instead using her modest savings to order art supplies online. She set up a makeshift studio in the corner of her room, her pencils and canvases a lifeline to the life she'd known. Nathan was a ghost in his own home. He left before dawn, his car's engine a faint rumble, and returned late, often after Ella had retreated to her room. Their interactions were brief, polite, and tinged with an unspoken tension. At breakfast, he'd nod over his coffee, his eyes scanning a tablet filled with stock reports. Once, she caught him glancing at her sketchbook, left open on the counter, but he said nothing, his expression unreadable. His coldness wasn't cruel, but it was deliberate, a wall as impenetrable as the glass surrounding the estate. Ella wondered if he regretted his decision to marry her, if she was an obligation he was already tiring of. Her own heart was a battlefield. Ryan's betrayal had left her raw, the memory of his note, "I'm sorry, I can't marry you," a wound that throbbed with every quiet moment. She'd loved him, or thought she had, drawn to his easy charm and promises of a shared future. But the humiliation of the altar, the pity in the guest's eyes, had cracked something in her. She was grateful to Nathan for sparing her that public disgrace, but gratitude wasn't trust. Lila's texts, filled with warnings about the Whitmore's shady past, kept Ella on edge. "He's hiding something," Lila wrote. "Don't let your guard down." Yet there were moments when Nathan's actions belied his icy demeanor. One morning, Ella found a tin of chamomile tea, her favorite, in the kitchen, tucked beside a box of gourmet coffee she knew he preferred. No note, no explanation, but the gesture felt intentional. Another day, a courier delivered a package to her room, a leather-bound journal with creamy pages, perfect for sketching. She traced the embossed cover, her fingers lingering, and wondered if Nathan had chosen it himself. These small acts chipped at her defenses, but they also deepened her confusion. Why did he care, if he barely spoke to her? One evening, restless and unable to sleep, Ella wandered the estate, her bare feet silent on the marble. She found herself in a library, its shelves towering with ancient books, their spines etched with gold. A single lamp glowed on a desk, illuminating a half-open volume of poetry. Keats, she noted, her father's favorite. She sank into a leather chair, the book in her lap, and let the words blur as her thoughts drifted. This house, this marriage, felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Nathan was at its center, a man of contradictions, cold yet kind, distant yet attentive. She didn't know how to reach him, or if she even wanted to. The sound of footsteps startled her. Nathan appeared in the doorway, his shirt untucked, a glass of water in his hand. He froze, clearly not expecting her. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Ella shook her head, closing the book. "This place, it's overwhelming. I don't know how to be here." He hesitated, then crossed the room, sitting in the chair opposite her. The lamp cast shadows across his face, softening its sharp edges. "It's not a home, he said almost to himself. It's a showcase. My father built it to impress, not to live in. Ella studied him, sensing a rare opening. Do you ever feel like you don't belong here? She asked, her voice tentative. Nathan's gaze met hers, and for a moment, the wall between them thinned. Every day, he admitted, but it's what I know. He paused, his fingers tightening around the glass. You don't have to fit into this, Ella. Be yourself. That's enough. The words, simple but earnest, caught her off guard. She wanted to ask more, to probe the man behind the mask, but he stood, the moment slipping away. Good night, he said, and left her in the library, the poetry book heavy in her hands. Back in her room, Ella lay awake, the ocean's murmur seeping through the balcony doors. She and Nathan were two lonely souls, orbiting each other in this vast, empty house. His promise, no expectations, no pressure, gave her space, but it also left her adrift. She was still healing, still guarding her heart, and Nathan's reserve mirrored her own. Yet in the chamomile tea, the journal, the fleeting honesty in the library, she glimpsed a possibility, a connection, however faint, that might one day bridge their solitude. For now, though, they were strangers sharing a roof, bound by a ring and a choice neither fully understood. The Whitmore estate in the Hamptons, with its transparent glass walls and hushed spaces, had become familiar yet still alien to Ella Monroe. Nearly 3 weeks had passed since the impromptu wedding, and she was still grappling to find her place in this opulent world. She kept to her spacious guest suite, sketching the endless waves of the ocean or working remotely for a small Brooklyn gallery, clinging to her true self. A 28-year-old artist from a working-class family, not the newly minted Mrs. Whitmore of high society. Nathan, true to his word, maintained a respectful distance. His presence felt more through small but meaningful gestures. A tin of chamomile tea in the pantry, a leather-bound journal left on her desk, or an overgrown garden corner being restored into a studio. But these acts, though warm, deepened her confusion, intensifying questions about why he'd married her. Their shared life was a cautious dance, each maintaining an invisible wall. Ella raramente vio a Nathan. Él se fue antes del amanecer y regresó mucho después de que ella se hubiera retirado a su habitación. Their brief encounters, a nod over morning coffee, a fleeting glance when she left her sketchbook on the counter, carried a quiet tension. His reserve wasn't cruel, but it was deliberate, a shield she couldn't penetrate. Ella wondered if he regretted marrying her, if she was a duty he was growing weary of. Her solitude was punctuated by memories of Ryan, his cruel note, "I'm sorry, I can't do this," and the wedding day's humiliation. She'd loved him, or at least the image he'd painted, a charming man promising a future where she could be herself, loved without fear of abandonment. But his betrayal had shattered that illusion, leaving her with unanswered questions. Why had he run? Was she not enough? These doubts mingled with Lila's warnings about the Whitmores' shady past, keeping Ella on edge, even as her heart sometimes wanted to trust Nathan's kindness. One overcast afternoon, as a light drizzle misted the windows, Ella wandered the estate, her mind too restless to draw. Lila's latest text, a cryptic, "Found some stuff on the Whitmores. Call me," left her uneasy, but she wasn't ready for more secrets. Seeking distraction, she roamed the hallways, her sneakers silent on the marble, until she heard sharp voices from the study. The heavy oak door was ajar, and through the gap, she saw Nathan standing by a mahogany desk, his posture tense, his voice low but cutting. Opposite him was Margaret Whitmore, her silver hair tightly bound, her hands clasped with the poise of someone accustomed to control. Ella knew she should leave, but the argument's intensity rooted her in place, her breath shallow, guilt warring with curiosity. Margaret's voice rang out, sharp and accusatory. "You've gone too far, Nathan. Marrying that girl to clean up Ryan's mess? It's reckless. The board is questioning your judgment, and this marriage isn't the distraction you think." Nathan's response was icy, each word measured. "Ryan left me no choice. His stunt at the altar could have tanked our stock worse than any scandal. I did what was necessary to protect the family's reputation." Margaret scoffed, pacing, her heels clicking on the floor. Protect the reputation? You could have let her walk away. Let the press forget it. Instead, you've tied us to a nobody from Brooklyn. Your father would never have approved. Forcing Ryan to propose to her was his idea, to save the company from bankruptcy. But you, what are you doing, Nathan? Ella's breath caught, her heart pounding, her fingers digging into the doorframe. Forcing Ryan to propose? She'd thought Ryan's love was real, that his promises, of supporting her art, of a shared future, came from his heart. But now Margaret's words were a blade, tearing through that illusion. She leaned closer, straining to hear, as Nathan spoke, his voice low but resolute. You and Father used Ella as a pawn. You pushed Ryan into that engagement to appease the Kesslers, to secure their investment and save Whitmore Enterprises from losses. But Ryan never wanted to marry her. He had a lover, Cassandra Tate, an actress. He ran because of her, not because of Ella. Ella's knees trembled, her stomach churning. Cassandra Tate, she'd seen the name in tabloids, a seductive actress often spotted at elite parties. Ryan's secret lover. The pieces fell into place. His late-night texts, his evasions, the forced smile when she asked about his social life. She'd attributed it to his busy schedule, his playboy charm, but now she saw the truth. She was a cog in a plan, a tool to save a failing company. The pain cut deep, but it also brought a strange relief. Ryan hadn't left because she wasn't enough, but because he was a coward, manipulated by his family and his own desires. Nathan's voice brought her back, now softer, almost angry. Ella isn't a pawn, Mother. I saw her that day, standing at the altar, facing the humiliation Ryan left her with. She didn't break. She's kind, warm, stronger than anyone in this family. I married her to protect our name, yes, but also because she deserved better. Margaret laughed, a brittle sound. Kind, warm. She's a nobody, Nathan. A poor artist from Brooklyn, with nothing but a few paintings and a sob story. You've made her our burden. If you truly cared, why not tell her the truth? That she was just part of the Kessler deal, and you're just the one picking up the pieces? Ella's nails bit into her palms, her breath catching. Part of a deal? The words echoed her deepest fear, that she was never truly loved, only a means to an end. She wanted to burst in, demand answers, but her feet were rooted to the floor. Nathan was silent for a long moment, then spoke, his voice barely audible. She'll know when the time is right, but I won't let you or anyone drag her into this game anymore. Margaret's heels clicked as she moved toward the door, forcing Ella to retreat into the hallway shadows. The older woman swept past, oblivious to Ella's presence, her perfume lingering like a warning. Ella waited until the study was silent before slipping back to her room, her legs unsteady, her mind reeling. She sank onto the bed, the revelations crashing over her like waves. Ryan hadn't loved her, never had. She was a pawn in a scheme to save Whitmore Enterprises, a tool to secure the Kessler deal. The truth burned, but it also freed her from the self-doubt that had haunted her. She wasn't to blame. Ryan had fled for Cassandra, for his own selfishness, not because of her, but Nathan's words about her kindness, her warmth, her strength, stirred her. He'd seen something in her, even when she couldn't see it herself. He'd married her, not just to save his family's reputation, but because he believed she deserved better. Ella looked out the window where the drizzle blurred the glass and felt a new emptiness in her heart, a fragile freedom to shape her future. She was still hurt, still wary of Nathan's intentions, but she was no longer bound to a betrayer. She stood, taking a deep breath, resolved to confront him, to demand honesty. But for now, she clung to the relief of being free from a lie. And in this vast house, amid secrets and shadows, Ella began to sense a flicker of light, a chance to rediscover herself. The Whitmore estate in the Hamptons, with its glass walls and hushed spaces, was slowly becoming familiar to Ella Monroe, though it still wasn't home. After the painful revelations about Ryan and the Whitmore family's schemes, Ella sought to reclaim her balance. She refused to let the sting of betrayal or the prying eyes of the press define her. Instead, she turned to her passion, art. With her modest savings and unwavering resolve, Ella started a free art class for underprivileged children in Brooklyn's Bed-Stuy neighborhood, a 2-hour drive from the estate. The small room in the community center, with its peeling walls and rickety tables, became her sanctuary. Every Saturday, she stood amidst chattering children, teaching them to blend colors, draw lines, and transform their fledgling ideas into vibrant paintings. The kids' laughter and the smell of acrylic paint made her feel alive, as if she'd rediscovered a piece of herself. The girl who once sketched in a Brooklyn kitchen, dreaming of a bigger world. What Ella didn't know was that the community center had been saved from closure by a secret donation. The manager, Ms. Rosa, only shrugged when Ella asked about the funding, mentioning a generous donor who'd covered the rent for a year. Ella suspected Nathan but held back from asking. His quiet gestures, chamomile tea, an art book, the garden being transformed into a studio, had become part of their strange, shared life. But after overhearing his argument with Margaret, she remained cautious, not yet ready to fully trust. One Saturday morning, as Ella helped a shy girl named Sophia paint a lopsided blue butterfly, the kids erupted in squeals, rushing toward the door. Ella looked up, startled, to see Nathan stride in, carrying a box brimming with colored pencils, sketch pads, and brushes. He wore a navy sweater instead of his usual tailored suit, his dark hair slightly tousled, looking more approachable, yet still faintly out of place in the noisy room. The children swarmed him, grabbing supplies, and Nathan, with a rare smile, handed them out with surprising patience. Sophia tugged Ella's sleeve, whispering loudly, "Miss Ella, that's the nice man who helped us keep the class." Ella's breath caught, her heart stuttering. She watched Nathan, now crouching to answer a boy's question, and caught a flicker of embarrassment in his eyes when they met hers. After the class ended and the kids left, Ella and Nathan stood alone in the room, surrounded by colorful drawings taped to the walls. She crossed her arms, her voice soft but firm. "You're the donor, aren't you? Why didn't you tell me?" Nathan rubbed the back of his neck, a boyish gesture that caught her off guard. "I didn't want you to think I was trying to buy your favor," he said, his voice low. "You love this place. I just wanted it to keep going." Ella felt a warmth spread through her, though she kept her tone even. "You keep doing these things. Tea, books, now this class. I don't know how to read you, Nathan. What do you want?" He looked at her, his gray eyes steady and sincere. "I want you to have a place where you can be yourself," he said simply. "Not because of me, or my family, or that wedding. Just for you." His words touched a tender spot in Ella's heart, but she held back, her wall still up. "Thank you," she said quietly, "but I need time to understand you, to understand us." Nathan nodded as if he'd anticipated her caution. "I get it," he said. "We'll take it one step at a time." The chance for the next step came unexpectedly a few nights later, when Ella fell ill with a severe cold. She lay curled up in her room, feverish and aching, her body worn from pushing herself too hard. Too stubborn to ask for help, she tried to tough it out alone. But near midnight, a soft knock roused her, and Nathan entered, carrying a tray with a steaming mug of tea, a bottle of cold medicine, and a damp cloth. He wore a rolled-up shirt, his hair disheveled, and for the first time Ella saw worry etched plainly on his face, a Nathan no longer the icy statue she'd first met. "You're burning up," he said, setting the tray on the nightstand. He placed the cloth on her forehead, his touch gentle yet decisive. "Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" Ella tried to sit up, her voice raspy. "I didn't want to bother you. You're always busy." Nathan's lips twitched, a faint smile. "Not too busy for this." He stayed through the night, checking her temperature, refilling her water, and coaxing her to take medicine. His presence was steady, comforting, and as the hours passed, Ella felt her defenses soften. In the dim glow of the bedside lamp, Nathan's guard seemed to slip too. When Ella, half delirious from fever, asked why he always kept people at a distance, he hesitated, then spoke, his voice low. "I was engaged once," he said, staring at the floor. 5 years ago. Her name was Claire. I thought she loved me, but she was after my name, My money. When I caught her selling company secrets to a rival, it broke something in me. I've kept my distance ever since. It's safer that way. Ella's heart ached at the rawness in his voice. She reached out, her hand brushing his. I'm sorry, she whispered, but not everyone's like that. He looked at her, his eyes softening. I'm starting to believe that, he said, and the weight of his words lingered between them, a quiet promise. As Ella recovered, their dynamic shifted, small steps drawing them closer. They began spending evenings together, no longer strangers bound by a contract, but two people learning each other. One weekend, they tackled the overgrown garden behind the estate, pulling weeds and planting new flowers under the spring sun. Nathan, sleeves rolled up and dirt smudged on his cheek, laughed, a rare, unguarded sound, when Ella accidentally sprayed him with the hose. The moment felt ordinary yet profound, a glimpse of what they could be. Under the estate's wide porch, they started a ritual of sitting together, sipping hot cocoa and sharing stories. One evening, as moonlight spilled across the wooden floor, Ella opened up about her dream of opening her own gallery, a space for underrepresented artists to shine. It's probably a long shot, she said, tracing the rim of her mug, but I want to create something that matters. Nathan listened, his gaze thoughtful. It's not a long shot, he said. You've got the vision and the heart. He paused, then added almost shyly, I've been working on something too, a novel. It's rough, but I want to publish it someday, maybe under a pseudonym. Ella's eyes widened, a smile breaking through. You're full of surprises, Nathan Whitmore. Will you let me read it? He chuckled, shaking his head. Not yet, it's a mess, but soon. These moments, gardening, cocoa, sharing dreams, wove a fragile thread of trust between them. Ella still carried the weight of Ryan's betrayal and the Whitmore secrets, but Nathan's actions spoke louder than her doubts. He wasn't the cold CEO she'd first met, nor the calculating savior she'd feared. He was a man with his own scars, trying, like her, to find something real. In the moonlight and the warmth of cocoa, love began to take root, silently but steadily, between two souls who once thought they'd always be alone. The gentle spring sunlight bathed the garden behind the Whitmore estate in Hamptons, where newly planted daisies swayed in the breeze. The restored fountain gurgled a soothing melody, blending with the chirping of birds in the trees. Ella Monroe stood among the flower beds, pruning shears in hand, a faint smile playing on her lips as she admired the work she and Nathan had poured into the space. Their evenings sipping hot cocoa on the porch, hours spent gardening together, and moments sharing dreams had woven a bond between them, fragile but growing stronger. The estate no longer felt like a cold prison to Ella. It was becoming a place she could call home, one small step at a time. Her free art classes in Brooklyn's Bed-Stuy neighborhood remained her greatest joy. Every Saturday, she drove 2 hours from the Hamptons, bringing paints and paper to teach underprivileged kids how to transform their imaginations into vibrant artwork. Their ringing laughter and clumsy but heartfelt brushstrokes were a balm for the wounds left by Ryan's betrayal and the Whitmore family's secrets. Standing in the small community center room, with its peeling walls and rickety tables, she felt more alive than ever. This was the real Ella Monroe, the artist who once sketched in a Brooklyn kitchen corner, not the newly minted Mrs. Whitmore of high society. Nathan, despite his demanding schedule of meetings and financial reports at Whitmore Enterprises, occasionally appeared unannounced at the classes. He'd bring a box of art supplies or simply sit in the corner, watching the kids with a subtle smile. Ella began to cherish his presence, those moments when he revealed the tenderness beneath his stoic exterior. But she still guarded a piece of her heart, afraid that this happiness, however sweet, could dissolve like a dream. Lila's warnings about the Whitmore's shady past, coupled with the memory of Ryan's betrayal, lingered as dark shadows in her mind. That fragile peace shattered one Saturday afternoon as Ella cleaned up after class. The kids had left, leaving the room filled with their drawings taped to the walls, glittering houses, flying cats, and starry skies. She was stacking paint jars when a black sports car pulled up outside the community center, its engine roaring in the neighborhood's quiet. The door swung open and Ryan Whitmore stepped out, his blonde hair tousled, his blue eyes glinting with the familiar confidence now laced with bitterness. Ella froze, clutching a box of pencils. Memories of the wedding crashing over her like a tidal wave. The curt note reading, "I'm sorry, I can't marry you." The flashing cameras and the humiliation she'd fought to bury. Ryan stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at her with a twisted smile, as if she, not he, were the betrayer. "Ella," he said, his voice smooth but edged with ice, "you look awfully happy, living in my brother's mansion, playing the perfect Mrs. Whitmore." Ella drew a deep breath, forcing herself to stand tall, her voice calm but firm. "Ryan, you have no right to be here. You made your choice when you left me at the altar." Ryan smirked, stepping closer, his gaze scanning her for vulnerabilities. "My choice? You're the one who jumped into Nathan's arms the second I left. Or was that the plan all along, using me as a stepping stone to get to him?" His accusation struck like a knife, making Ella recoil, her breath catching. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice trembling but fierce. "You abandoned me in front of hundreds of people, Ryan. You're the coward, not me." He shrugged, his smile twisted with malice. "Maybe, but who do you think people will believe? A nobody from Brooklyn or a Whitmore betrayed by his own brother?" He leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper, each word sharp as a blade. "I've spoken to some friends in the media. They love this story. Ella Monroe, the schemer, always in love with Nathan and using me to get to him." Ella felt the blood drain from her face, her mind reeling. She wanted to scream, to slap the smug look off his face, but her body froze, her hands trembling so violently the pencil box nearly slipped. Ryan turned, tossing one last jab over his shoulder as he climbed into his car. "Enjoy your fake happiness, Ella." The car roared to life and sped off, leaving her alone in the fading daylight, her heart heavy. Within hours, the rumor spread like wildfire. Tabloids erupted with sensational headlines. "Whitmore scandal, bride manipulates brothers to climb social ladder." Articles cited sources close to Ryan, painting Ella as a gold digger who'd orchestrated the entire wedding drama. Photos from the wedding, Ella's stunned face as Nathan took her hand, were distorted to fit a false narrative, as if she'd planned it all. Social media was worse, with thousands of vicious comments calling her a family wrecker, a snake, or a money chaser. Some parents from the art class sent messages, questioning whether she was trustworthy to teach their children, and a few even pulled their kids from the program. Ella returned to the estate, curling up in her room, her phone buzzing relentlessly with texts from Lila and news alerts. She turned it off, feeling as if she were drowning in a raging sea. The humiliation of the wedding day resurfaced, but this time it was worse. She wasn't just a victim. She was the accused, judged and condemned by the public. She thought of Nathan, of their evenings on the porch when he spoke of his dream to write, of the scars left by his ex-fiancée. He didn't deserve to be dragged into this mess, to have his company, Whitmore Enterprises, which he'd fought to save, suffer because of Ryan's lies. A painful but clear thought flashed through her mind. Maybe she should leave. Leave the estate, leave Nathan, let him clean up this chaos without her dragging him down. She took a sheet of paper, her fingers trembling as she wrote, "Nathan, I don't want to be a burden. Thank you for everything, but I think I should go." But as she folded the note, a spark of defiance flared within her. Leaving meant letting Ryan win, letting his lies shape her story. She wasn't a schemer, not a gold digger, and she wouldn't let him steal the happiness she and Nathan had built from the wreckage. Ella tore the letter, the pieces fluttering to the floor. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she wiped them away, stood, and resolved to stay, at least to face Nathan, to see whose side he would take. She didn't know if he would defend her or prioritize his company, but she knew she couldn't run anymore. She had stood tall at the altar on their wedding day, and she would stand tall again, no matter how fierce the storm. The next morning, the Whitmore estate was cloaked in a tense silence, as if the air itself were holding its breath. Ella Monroe woke with swollen eyes, the vicious tabloid headlines haunting her like a relentless nightmare. She shuffled to the kitchen, intending to brew a cup of chamomile tea to steady her nerves, but her mind was a whirlwind of Ryan's accusations. that she'd used him, that she'd always loved Nathan and orchestrated everything to climb the social ladder. Each article, each social media comment was a stab, cutting deep into the self-respect she'd fought to rebuild since the humiliating wedding day. She didn't know how much more she could endure, or whether Nathan, with all the tenderness he'd shown her, would stand by her or choose to protect his empire. Nathan stood at the kitchen counter, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp but controlled, like a general preparing for battle. "Call the PR team now. I want a press conference at headquarters today." No delays." He hung up, turned, and his expression softened when he saw Ella. She stood there, arms wrapped around herself, looking small and fragile in her worn sweater. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, filled with a concern that made it seem as if nothing else in the world mattered more than her in that moment. Ella shook her head, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper. "No, Nathan, I'm not. Ryan, he's destroying me. And your company, I saw the reports saying your stock is dropping." Nathan stepped closer, his gray eyes locking onto hers, unwavering. "The company doesn't matter," he interrupted, his voice firm. "You matter more. I'll handle this, Ella. I promise." She looked at him, her heart pounding, a surge of emotions rising, hope mingled with fear. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You could let me go. Let this die down. The company is everything to you, Nathan. Why risk it?" Nathan took her hand, his touch warm and steady, like an anchor in a storm. "Because I don't want to lose you," he said, his voice low but intense. "I've let too many things slip through my fingers. Dreams, trust, people I cared about. But you're something I'll fight to keep. I won't let Ryan or anyone destroy what we're building." His words were like a small flame, warming Ella's chilled heart, but fear lingered. She was afraid he'd change his mind, that the pressure from the board or the Whitmore name would outweigh his feelings for her. She nodded, not daring to say more, but inside a spark of hope flickered. Nathan squeezed her hand lightly before turning away, making another call to arrange the press conference. Ella stood there watching his back, wondering if this moment would mark the beginning or the end of their story. The press conference was held at Whitmore Enterprises headquarters in Manhattan, a gleaming glass tower rising against the city skyline. Hundreds of reporters crammed into the grand conference room, flashes popping relentlessly, the air thick with curiosity and hunger for a scoop. Cameras from New York's biggest networks trained on the podium, where an embossed Whitmore Enterprises logo gleamed in the background. Ella stood backstage, her hands clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palms, her heart hammering like it might burst. Lila Carter, her best friend, stood beside her, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. "He'll do the right thing, Ella. I know he's a cold bastard, but I see how he looks at you. He won't leave you hanging." Ella nodded, but her heart was heavy with worry. If Nathan chose to protect his company over her, she wouldn't blame him. Whitmore Enterprises was his legacy, the thing he'd sacrificed personal dreams to preserve. But that truth didn't make the potential pain any easier. She thought of their evenings on the porch, when he spoke of his dream to write, of the scars left by his ex-fiancée. She thought of the garden they'd tended together, the art classes he'd quietly funded. If he turned away now, those moments would dissolve, leaving her with a broken heart. Nathan stepped onto the podium, his black suit sharp, his face calm but his eyes like steel. He stood there, commanding and unyielding, as if no camera or question could shake him. The crowd hushed, waiting, and he began, his voice ringing clear through the space. "I'm here today to address the rumors about my wife, Ella Monroe, and my family." Murmurs rippled through the room, but he raised a hand, demanding silence, his gaze sweeping the reporters like a warning. "My brother Ryan has claimed that Ella used him to get to me. That's a lie. The truth is, I was the one who begged Ella for a chance." The room fell silent, the sound of cameras clicking like a storm. Ella's heart stopped, her breath caught in her chest. Nathan continued, his voice steady but brimming with emotion, each word carved from his heart. "On our wedding day, when Ryan abandoned Ella at the altar, I saw a woman who was strong, kind, and deserving of far more than my brother could ever offer. I took her hand, not because she needed saving, but because I wanted to be with her. Every day since, I've become more certain that it was the best decision I've ever made. The crowd erupted, applause mixing with shouted questions from reporters, but Nathan didn't waver. He turned to Ella, standing in the wings, his eyes soft but resolute. He beckoned her forward. Ella hesitated, her legs trembling, the flashes threatening to swallow her. Lila gave her a gentle push, whispering, "Go. This is your moment." Ella took a deep breath, stepping onto the podium, feeling as if the entire world were watching her every move. Nathan took her hand, pulling her close, his warmth easing some of her fear. And then, to the astonishment of everyone, he knelt, pulling a small silver ring engraved with daisies, the symbol of their shared moments, from chamomile tea to the garden they'd nurtured, from his pocket. "Ella," he said, his voice catching, revealing vulnerability for the first time in front of the crowd, "I didn't marry you to save anyone. I married you because I love you. Let me do this right, this time, from my heart." Tears streamed down Ella's face, not from shame or pain, but from an unexpected, profound joy she couldn't articulate. She looked into Nathan's eyes, seeing his sincerity, seeing the man who'd shed his cold exterior to stand here, placing his heart and reputation in her hands. She nodded, unable to speak, and Nathan slid the ring onto her finger, standing to pull her into his arms. She pressed her face to his chest, hearing his steady heartbeat, and in that moment, the world outside, cameras, reporters, rumors, faded away. The crowd exploded, some clapping enthusiastically, others yelling questions, but Nathan only held Ella's hand tighter, leading her off the podium. The conference ended with Nathan's vow to sue any outlet continuing to spread false rumors. He also revealed that Ryan had admitted his wrongdoing in a private family conversation, and Margaret Whitmore, though reluctantly, had sided with Nathan, cutting contact with Ryan to protect the family's reputation. Ryan, facing backlash from his own kin, vanished from the public eye, his reputation stained by the lies he'd sown. That night, back at the estate, Ella sat on the porch, the daisy ring glinting in the moonlight. Nathan sat beside her, his hand entwined with hers, and for the first time, their silence wasn't born of distance, but of understanding. Ella leaned her head against him, looking up. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but sincere, "for choosing me." Nathan smiled, a rare, warm smile. "I'll always choose you, Ella, every time." And under the gentle moonlight, they sat together, two once lonely souls who had found each other, ready to face any storm ahead. The sunset cast a golden glow over the garden behind the Whitmore estate in the Hamptons, bathing the blooming daisy beds in warmth. Twinkling fairy lights hung from tree branches, and the restored fountain gurgled a gentle melody, blending with the laughter and chatter of close friends. Ella Monroe stood before a simple wooden table, her white wedding dress flowing lightly in the summer breeze, her eyes sparkling with joy. This wasn't the opulent ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, where she'd once walked down the aisle in humiliation only to be abandoned by Ryan. This was a real wedding, simple but brimming with love, held in the very garden she and Nathan had nurtured, where each daisy was a memory of their journey. A month had passed since the explosive press conference at Whitmore Enterprises headquarters, where Nathan had knelt before hundreds of cameras, declared his love, and proposed with a silver ring engraved with daisies, silencing Ryan's lies. Ella still remembered that moment, Nathan's earnest gaze, the glinting daisy ring, and the feeling of her heart opening, embracing a love she'd once thought she didn't deserve. When she nodded, tears streaming down her face, it wasn't surrender or salvation. It was a free choice, a promise from her heart to his. They decided to hold a new wedding, not to flaunt or prove anything to the world, but to celebrate their love. The guest list was small, limited to those who truly mattered. Lila Carter, Ella's best friend, radiant in a sunflower yellow dress, serving as maid of honor. Ms. Rosa, the Bed-Stuy Community Center manager who'd become a dear friend, and a handful of friends from Brooklyn who'd shared Ella's struggles. Most special were the children from Ella's art classes, dressed in their best clothes, running through the garden, clutching drawings they'd made as wedding gifts. There were no reporters, no high society, no flashing cameras, just genuine smiles and the warmth of a chosen family. Nathan stood beside Ella, wearing a light gray linen suit, his dark hair slightly tousled in the breeze. He couldn't take his eyes off her, his gaze filled with admiration and a deep love he'd once hidden behind a cold facade. As they exchanged vows, his voice was steady but rich with emotion, promising to love and protect her through every storm. Ella, her voice trembling slightly, vowed to be his partner, not just in sunny days, but in the darkest nights. They exchanged rings, Ella's daisy ring and a simple silver band for Nathan, and when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the children's cheers and applause rang out, making them both laugh. The reception unfolded in the garden, with white silk ribbons draped overhead and wooden tables laden with simple but delicious food, sandwiches from Ella's favorite Brooklyn deli, pastries from a local bakery, and wine Nathan had selected from the estate's cellar. The kids ran everywhere, playing tag, while Lila led an impromptu dance under the lights. Ella and Nathan sat together, hand in hand, watching everyone revel in the joy, feeling a peace they'd never known. Lila, after a few glasses of wine, pulled Ella into a tight hug. "I told you so," she whispered, eyes twinkling. "That cold guy has a heart, and it's yours." Life after the wedding wasn't a perfect fairy tale, but it was rich with meaning. Ella continued running her art classes in Bed-Stuy, expanding the program with Nathan's quiet support. She began planning her biggest dream, a gallery in Brooklyn, a space for underrepresented artists to showcase their work and find their voice. She spent mornings visiting potential locations, sketchbook in hand to jot down ideas, and each small step forward made her feel she was living true to herself. Nathan, meanwhile, steered Whitmore Enterprises through the aftermath of Ryan's scandal. The company's stock stabilized post-conference, and he earned renewed respect from the board, not just for his business acumen, but for his integrity. But he was no longer the man who lived solely for the company. He made time for Ella, for their porch evenings where they shared hot cocoa and passages from the novel he was refining. He began sending early chapters to a publisher under a pseudonym, and whenever Ella read them, she saw a piece of his soul, profound, vulnerable, and full of hope. They weren't immune to challenges. The press occasionally dredged up the past, and some of Nathan's business partners remained wary due to old rumors. But Nathan stood by Ella, not just as a husband, but as a partner, ready to face any storm. There were nights when Ella woke, haunted by memories of the first wedding, but Nathan was always there, pulling her into his arms, whispering that she'd never face the darkness alone again. One vibrant autumn afternoon, Ella sat in the Bed-Stuy Community Center, surrounded by her students as they painted a mural for the neighborhood. Their brushes created a vivid scene, houses, trees, and a colorful sky, reflecting their dreams of a brighter world. Ella, in a paint-splattered sweater, was guiding a girl named Sophia on mixing blue hues when the kids erupted in cheers. Nathan walked in, carrying a box of cookies and juice for them, a warm smile on his face. "Daddy Nate!" the kids shouted, swarming him, tugging him to the floor to show off their drawings. Nathan laughed, letting them climb over him, his dress shirt quickly streaked with paint. A boy named Jamal, in his overzealous excitement, spilled a jar of blue paint on Nathan's shoes, and instead of annoyance, Nathan chuckled, pulling Ella into a playful hug that left them both smudged with color. "I think we need a mural at home," he whispered in her ear, eyes twinkling. Ella laughed, leaning into his shoulder, watching the kids return to their mural. Sophia ran up, handing Ella a clumsy drawing of a daisy and said, "Miss Ella, you and Mr. Nate are our family, right?" Ella's throat tightened, tears shimmering. She hugged Sophia, nodding. "Yes, sweetie, we're family." As the afternoon sun cast golden rays across the room, Ella and Nathan sat among the kids, hand in hand, paint staining their clothes. She watched the children, their faces glowing with creativity and hope, and felt a profound sense of belonging. This was her family, not defined by blood or wealth, but by love, resilience, and shared dreams. With Nathan by her side through every storm and sunrise, Ella knew she'd found home. Not a place, but a feeling, a promise that they would always belong to each other.